Well, hello everybody. I'm really excited that for my very first podcast of Believe Magic, my guest, my very special guest, is a lifetime friend, a professional. Wow, there's a whole bunch of things here to list. Professional journalist, author, playwright, screenwriter, comedian, songwriter, and I know so much more than I'm probably missing. Mark Leiren-Young. Mark, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for doing this. I'm honored to be your first guest for this.
I'm excited that it's you. You have had such an amazing career, considering both of us kind of launched it through the black metal fantasy and, of course, the initiation and stuff. I guess my first question is, what are some of the milestones you had since we jetted off into our prospective careers? What were the first couple of things that happened to you that you went into and decided to pursue?
One or two things have happened since we did that.
One or two.
Uh, let's see. Uh, Part of what came about from the initiation was, as you also dealt with, so many people going, yeah, maybe theater's not for you. Maybe you should stay away from this theater thing. And as a result, I kind of doubled down to prove that I could do this and I could live in this world. So, I started at the University of Victoria. I double majored in theater and creative writing and uh, did sort of my first real hit show I was a UVic student, and it was an improv soap opera. And I was one of three writers on it. It was called Beacon Hill, which will mean nothing to anybody who's not from Victoria. But in Victoria, it was legendary. It was a ridiculous hit. And I'm like, okay,
And was this
hits are
still in the
better.
80s? This was still in the 80s, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
very much so. And I followed that up by doing the most successful equity co-op in Canadian history, a show called Escape from Fantasy Gardens at the Fire Hall Arts Center. And it was the most successful equity co-op until some young kid named George F. Walker decides to do a co-op in Toronto. Now, you may not know George Walker. He really is Canada's most successful and most legendary playwright. And he put together a co-op and finally broke my record
Oh,
like
wow.
decades later.
Wow.
So that was my take on Bill Van and BC's wild political scene in the 80s again. And both of these, I don't believe either of those happens if I'm not still really ticked off at being told that we didn't know what we were doing. Uh, so yeah, those were my first big theater moments. And at the same time, I was always working as a journalist. Uh, so I wrote
And
for
what made you
everybody.
start to pursue, like, because you were in the theater. Now journalism, were you doing that in high school as well, or did you
I
just
was. I was
oh,
always doing, see, that was the part of the world that you didn't know me from in high school. But I ran the school paper. So, but you and uh our friend who played Santar knew me from theater life, right?
right?
So I was always doing school plays
Yeah.
and the school paper, and they were two very separate worlds. The way high school is, every sort of different thing is its own clique in its own world.
Yeah.
And I was very much in the journalism world, and I started the school paper there,
Then I
which
guess
lasted several years after the
okay.
Hamburg Mosaic. Yeah.
Well, I guess then the question is, you had theater, you were pursuing the theater for the reasons you said. You were also pursuing journalism. Was it ever kind of a, do I really want to go the theater way or do I want to go the journalism way? And what kind of tilted it either way?
Always. I mean, that's why I double majored when I got to university,
Ah,
was I could not make a decision because there were things that I loved about theater. I mean, seriously, the hit of doing theater, I'm convinced part of doing it again, even after a show like The Initiation. I've got a theory that performing basically must kick in the same chemical, I think it's oxytocin, as childbirth, where basically you absolutely forget the pain. Somehow you go, that was so much fun. And you forget every fight you had and all of the drama you went through to get in there. You're like, that was so cool. Must do it again. I'm sure theater emits that chemical.
that
Same
is
reason that anyone has more than one kid. I think that's why people do more than one show.
that is a
But
great analogy. Some might
Thanks.
argue it, but it is a great analogy. And it's a good point too, because as we talked about in the, or you talked about, and I guess we both did in the about the initiation, we crashed and burned with that. Yet, we still wanted to pursue it. There is something about, what that love of theater, the love of entertaining that stuck with me, that stuck with you, and you did continue to pursue both.
Yeah,
And
always.
and still to this day, I still believe you're doing both of those, obviously, because
Very
of
much so.
what just happened, and we'll get to that momentarily. But you also went off and did some traveling. Did something up in, is it Dawson City? And if
Uh,
I'm trying, go,
I did spend time there. You're thinking Williams Lake. I did a
Williams Lake.
stint in
Sorry, my
Williams Lake.
apologies. Williams Lake.
But
Yes.
again, this is, and also back in the 80s, what happened was after I graduated from the University of Victoria, I initially thought I scored a theater job. I actually did score a theater job in Ontario. The grant fell through for the Children's Theater Company. So very, initiation curse, if you will.
Yes.
Uh, and instead, I get a call from the Williams Lake Tribune, one of BC's more venerable uh, community papers, and they needed a reporter, little wilder than that, but they, I had a friend from the UBC student paper who had lied and told the editor at the Tribune that I was an ace photographer. Uh, Now, for you youngins out there, which at this point, I'm not sure who doesn't think that everybody's phone used to have a camera. You used to know how to, there used to be skill sets involved in taking photos
Yes.
beyond taking your camera out of your pocket or purse. I did not have those skills. So, uh, yeah, I showed up and thought I was going to be fired in day one. But fortunately, the photographer took a liking to me and taught me how to load this camera and basically taught me how to shoot on an exposure so she could save any photo I took that would have turned out wrong. Basically, she loaded my camera as much as possible. She idiot proofed my camera
Okay.
because I had a decent eye, but I've never been technical, as you know. And so she set all of the settings on my camera. My good friend Wendy's like, yeah, I'm going to set this to here and this here and this here and this here because it's all going to be easier to fix in the darkroom. Uh, so I ended up at the Williams Lake Tribune, and then I left the Williams Lake Tribune to do a play in Vancouver. And seriously, throughout my entire life, I alternated between now I'm going to do a play, now I'm going to work for a newspaper or freelance. And as I became more successful, I did more of those at the same time. I stopped switching and just went, yeah, this is this hat, this is this hat. And I just started switching hats at random.
Did you not write, I don't know, was it a play or a book? And excuse me for my poor memory, and maybe I should have researched this a little more, about your experience up there?
Yes. Oh, you're doing fine. I wrote a book called Never Shoot a Stampede Queen,
That's, yes.
which I wrote years after living in Williams Lake, and it won the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor, which is an outrageously prestigious award in Canada. If you look
Congratulations.
at the past winners, thanks. You look at the past winners, I'm in very fine company. Pretty much every writer I admire in Canada, because we got a lot of funny writers, has won a Leacock. It's a very wow list, and I was very honored to
Wow.
make it. And
And you were
that,
quite, I'm sorry, but you were quite young. You were just relatively out of high school, within 10 years out of high school, and to win an award. That's
oh no,
beyond
the
just,
the book was many years later.
oh, it was many years
So
later. Oh, my apologies.
the
Okay.
book, I wrote the book not long afterwards, but I didn't really write it as a book. I just kept writing articles about all the crazy things that happened to me in Williams Lake
Yeah.
and sold those stories, and they turned into the book. But that book turned into two different stage plays that had varying degrees of success. The production of that stage play in Kamloops was a ridiculously sold out run. It was a solo. Both the stage plays were solo. The wildest part was I had a couple of Canada's best actors playing me, which was surreal.
Wow.
So I had Zach Stevenson and Ryan Beal both doing their Mark impersonations on stage, which was so weird. It was so weird. And watching Zach study me and watching as these two actors were like, yeah, yeah, Mark's always got a Coke in his hands. Coke or Diet Coke, they were like, okay, he doesn't sit still. So they were mimicking how I don't sit still. It was
I
so,
remember that well.
so weird.
I remember that well. When we worked on the Black Metal Fantasy and the Initiation, you and I would get together for meetings. You would sit and you just kept rocking back and forth like you couldn't stay still. I loved it. I loved the energy. I
Yeah, and
remember
also
that.
all the pacing, all of that, all
Yeah.
ended up on stage with them doing me. But I mean, there's a piece of journalism that turned into theater. And throughout my career, what happened was I started to blend the two. I started to blend the research skills into what I was doing on stage. And most of my most successful stuff has combined those two things. But yeah, I had the, gosh, I've really got to stop one of these things. I've really got to focus. And I remember deciding I was going to do that and that I was going to drop whichever one, whatever was doing worst, whatever I was not playing at a really high level at. I remember vividly I don't make a lot of New Year's resolutions. I said, wherever I'm not playing at like a totally high level, I'm leaving and I'm going to focus on the other thing. So that was the year that as a playwright, and it was the year as a playwright that I had one of my plays down at the Citadel Theater, the play that you know well, because one of the characters was based on you, Blueprints from Space,
Oh,
was
right.
done at the Citadel Theater. And I also broke into Time magazine as a journalist. And just to complicate things, I made my debut as a TV writer writing an episode of a series called Reboot,
Right.
which at that time was on ABC television. So I'm going Time Magazine, ABC, and the biggest theater in Western Canada. I do not think I'm going to choose to lose any of these things. I think I shall stick with all of them. So instead of leaving a thing, I added a thing.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
So after making my big decision, I was going to finally focus, like everybody been telling me to do my entire life. I was like, yes, now I do this other thing too.
And it's great, and it's actually it's fun to have more than just one thing,
Oh yeah.
especially of different disciplines, whether it's journalism, whether it's playwright or whatever, because things will fail. And you and I again have both experienced
Yeah.
not necessarily failures, but extreme letdowns, brick walls,
Hmm.
hurdles that we can't overcome. And what is it that helped you when you came in? Like, name one of the if you're okay with sharing,
Sure.
a big letdown and what you did to overcome it, and what you went to get past it.
Wow.
I know, and we've had a few. I know we both have. So,
We've had one or two.
and we both keep attributing it to that black metal fantasy curse that we
Which I
alluded
quite
to.
like. That's actually a really good way
Yeah.
to, have something you can blame it on. It's really nice. You
It is.
know,
It is.
I'm really good with going, yes, it's the curse of this. It's the curse of the funder whose name we do not speak because lawyers exist.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
the person who is going to give us money to, you know,
Make it
live
all
out
happen.
our on stage dreams, make it all happen. Uh, Thing is, I look back at that now, and having worked especially in TV and film,
Mhm.
I go, wow, that is showbiz. It really is. Uh, you know, I've worked on some really big TV shows that have gone sideways for real because somebody didn't fill out the right form at the right time. Where it's like the difference between if somebody filled out the right form, I make a six-figure income that year from writing like four episodes of a cartoon. Uh, but they didn't, and that sort of it just happens. And it's funny because, sorry, I'm just adjusting my headphone there.
No
So,
worries.
on the YouTubes. Uh, but it's funny. I don't think most people realize that so often their failures have nothing to do with them. Like having been in casting sessions and seeing why things change and how things change and seeing how arbitrary they are. It's like you you think that you didn't get the part because you didn't do a good audition. No, you didn't get the part because you're 3 inches taller than the lead, or you didn't get the part because you're because you were wearing glasses that day and they didn't want glasses. I've sat there going, I'm sure they own contacts. And the casting director and the showrunner are looking at me like, get away, bug. Right? Like just like you are beneath me, you insect person. And I'm going, no, no, seriously, I've acted. They'll cut their hair's too long. They'll cut their hair for the part. Whatever they have in their head, it's nothing to do with you. And the only reason that I know why certain things have gone sideways probably is the journalism instinct, which is I ask. And the first TV show that I ever wrote for, the first adult TV show, I wrote an episode for a series called Sci Factor, which was hosted by Dan Aykroyd. And
Wow.
there were only a handful of changes to my script, but I immediately thought I did this wrong. What did I do wrong? And, how could I have done better? Right. So I approached the showrunner who made time for me because nobody asked this. They go, I've got my paycheck, I'm moving on. And I'm like, no, no, this is my first TV show. Why did you change this? And why did you change that? And they went, oh, well, this moved from night to day because we ran it or daylight. We ran it at daylight, right? Oh, and I was like, but what about I wrote this monologue and it went to a different person. Oh, and they're like, yeah, yeah, that's because the monologue was really good. I don't understand. They said the star heard it and said, there's no way a guest actor gets to do that monologue. So they took the monologue from there. And everything had an explanation like that. And I had assumed I'd done something wrong. And years later, I was working as a story editor on a show called Blood Ties. And two of the absolute best television writers in Canada were writing episodes. Well, what happened was they got their marching orders for those episodes before the show had started shooting. A ton of things changed between when the show shot and when their episodes were delivered. And there was no time to send it back to fix them. So, myself and one of the other story editors, wonderful, wonderful writer who's gone on to become a showrunner in his own right, Dennis Heaton, are handed these two scripts by two of the best writers in the country and have to adapt them so they fit what the show is now, not what it was
When it started.
initially,
Yeah.
and completely rewrite those episodes.
Oh.
And I'm sure they didn't ask because they were pros and they were used to this happening. But I'm sitting there going, I can't believe I'm even touching this guy's script, right? But I'm looking and going, it no longer fits the show. They didn't do anything wrong. It was there was nothing wrong with the script. And I was so grateful that I was able to see, oh my God, this isn't personal. This isn't
Nothing to do with you.
you.
It's
It had nothing to do with them. The changes that were made on my script had nothing to do with me. Um, you know, there really are forces beyond your control, you know, and that is so good to know.
it is the
Like,
nature of the beast, and that's what you have to come to realize that it is beyond your control. You can only
yeah,
control so much of what you can do, but other obviously external forces can change that, and it can
yeah.
change it on the drop of a hat. And it's as frustrating as ever, but that's what this world is all about.
Well, you and
Um,
I can only do the best work you and I can do. Like when I started performing, when I started doing comedy on stage, you go, "Oh my God, the the mic's not working," or whatever. And like all you can control is how you react to the mic not working.
exactly,
You
exactly,
can't you can't be set in a decision, fix the mic,
exactly.
right?
Yep.
And I got the point where the more things went wrong, I would just turn to the audience and go, this is what is happening. Right? I just got really transparent. But doing,
Which
I
turns a
remember doing
negative
it.
into a positive.
I remember doing a show with you where something was going wrong. And I just stood up and I went out on stage and I was your assistant. And I started saying and making jokes about it.
Yeah,
And, and suddenly it was like, oh, it's okay now.
yeah.
They're not scared. Because also, when you're on stage, people are actually rooting for you to succeed. You
They
think they're
are,
rooting for
and
you to
if you're
fail?
uncomfortable, they'll feel you're uncomfortable.
Yes.
And you can't let them feel that. You can't let them know that. It's mistakes I'd learned. I'm not going to go into that now, but mistakes that I had learned in doing magic shows that It took it took a long time in my early years to get with it when if a trick failed or something happened that my personality, my energy would go down, and that was wrong. That was wrong. I
Yeah,
learned
has to
that
go up.
it has to, and in fact, make fun of it, laugh at it. And like you said, that word you said, beautiful, transparent. Just be honest with the audience, and they will forgive you. They'll let you continue on. And half the time, they don't even know that something went wrong, in all kinds of stuff like that. So
Oh, good. I think I had one of the other lives that I picked up that was very unexpected was performing as half the comedy duo called Local Anxiety.
I wanted to ask
And
about that too. Yes, tell us, please.
and oh, that was
And
man.
that was political too. That was very political, if I remember
That
correctly.
was because I kept doing political satire and I wrote these shows like Escape from Fantasy Gardens, which were big hits. And the actors didn't get the jokes, right? By their own admission. They weren't political beasts, right?
Right, right.
So I'm writing these political satires and they're staring at me going, is this funny? I'm like, yes, it is. And then they perform in front of the audience, and the audience would laugh, and they're like, okay, I'll trust you. But they really weren't, they were into making people laugh. They really weren't into what I was writing. It was a very interesting thing, even though it was successful.
Yeah.
And there was one actor I was playing with. There's an earlier iteration of this where I just goofed around with a friend of mine. And we did a version called Impolite Company, and we did a fringe show, and
That was,
with
is
my
it
friend Art
Kevin?
Norris.
No.
No, the first one was my friend Art Norris, and we did
Oh,
really goofy stuff.
okay.
And then that came out of me being on the Edmonton Fringe Festival the day Wayne Gretzky was sold to LA.
Oh,
And I said to Art, I said, go borrow a guitar. And he said, why? I said, I'm going to pay for our dinner. What are you going to do? He said, I'm going to write a song about Wayne Gretzky getting traded to LA because like the entire city of Edmonton's in freaking mourning,
oh, I'll bet.
right? It
Yeah.
was just like devastation in the city of Edmonton. And we are surrounded by 100,000 people in Edmonton, biggest festival at the time was really one of the biggest festivals in the country. And I get him to pick up a guitar. I went, do you know Bye Bye Love? And Bye Bye Wayne, Bye Bye Stanley Cup. Let's lynch Peter Puck. I think I'm going to cry. So we gathered huge crowds. And this first time I'd ever busked that it was just me going, this will work. I knew in every fiber of my being that if we mocked this, we would pay for our dinner that night with the money we got thrown into the borrowed guitar case. So we performed for a while, and CBC Radio heard about us, and they started buying some of our stuff. And then Art moved to Calgary, and my friend Kevin Crofton, who'd been in all my political reviews, uh, he was the one person who got all the jokes. He played wonderful guitar,
Yeah.
really super versatile guitar player. And then the name, the weirdest thing, my mom, who's not a woo woo person, calls me and says, Mark, if you call yourselves Local Anxiety, you will be famous. I'm like, what? I had a dream. If you call yourselves Local Anxiety, you will be famous. I'm like, my mom does not have dreams like that. I never heard my mom say anything like that ever. And I told this to Kevin and laughed. He went, oh, that's her name. Because he was like, I am not saying no to your mom's dream. Because we had all sorts, I can't remember what our name was. We were probably going to be in polite company again. He's like, no, no, your mom had a dream. That is our name, man. And so uh, we go with Local Anxiety. And sure enough, we became famous, or we certainly became Canadian famous, and we
Yes.
performed around the world. We played the Vancouver Folk Festival. I emceed the Vancouver Folk Festival. Like my co-MC wasn't Kevin, it was a wonderful comedian, Christine Taylor. And so I emceed an event with 10,000 people at it and kicked off the Vancouver Folk Festival singing a cappella for 10,000 people, which was madness. I
Wow.
never imagined that in my life. I do something like that,
Wow.
right? And we won awards for National Public Radio in the States. Maclean's magazine wrote us up multiple times. Peter C. Newman, who was the columnist at Maclean's, called us the future of Canadian comedy. I mean, it was just, we were on tons of TV shows. So it's like, my mom was right. But it is Canada, so famous doesn't equal rich, but it was fun. And it paid our bills. I mean, for several years, I paid my bills jumping around being a goofball on stage. And
Yeah,
was
you had a
really
good run with
interesting.
that. You had a really good run with Local
Oh,
Anxiety. I was always hearing
man.
about it. Always. And that
We,
was before the internet, before the media, everything, and I was
Yeah.
still seeing it everywhere. That was great.
Well, part of what happened was I would invite the people we made fun of to perform with us. And the absolute biggest shocker was when Kim Campbell had run for prime minister. She, like, Kim Campbell was the conservative leader. Again, for you youngins out there, Canada actually had a female prime minister once. Kim Campbell, she was decimated. She won 2 seats
Yeah.
and basically went into hiding, uh, except for one thing. She responds to my invitation saying, "You should perform with local anxiety on stage." So Kim Campbell basically shows up at the Arts Club Theater during our previews and said, "Was this guy kidding?" And so I arrived at the Arts Club Theater and I'm suddenly on the phone with our very recently former prime minister going,
Wow.
"What would you be game to do on stage?" And we bat around a few ideas and end up doing a top 10 list. And the basically the photo of Kim Campbell on stage with us went pre-internet viral. It was posted around the world. So
Wow.
photos of Kim Campbell and myself, because I was doing a parody pose of Kim Campbell that would take too long to explain here, um,
Do you have an image
went
of that? Do
viral.
you have an image of
So
that?
I can share that,
Okay,
but it
good.
went around the freaking world, and
Wow.
I'll share that with you for your, your
And I'll
viewers.
put that up for our viewers after.
Oh, I'll share the McLean stuff if you want. Sure.
That is a great picture. I can see why that went worldwide. Um, Now, something I definitely want to talk about. The last episode we did of the documentary last week talked about the initiation, and I think we briefly touched on. I'm not sure if we did then or if it's going to be in the next episode about the book. What inspired you to write the book about our experience with the initiation, called Free Magic Secrets Revealed? And I want to know how that name came to be as well. Please tell me.
Okay. Couple things. First, I remember joking about doing a book about this the entire time as things went wrong. I said, one day this is going to be hilarious when I write about it. Every time something went wrong, you know, I've I had a qigong instructor once who said, "It's all chi, it's all life force. Whenever anything goes wrong, when you're stuck in a, when you're stuck in a line, just go, it's all chi. When you're, stuck in traffic, when somebody's yelling, just go, it's all chi." And I'm like, if you're a writer, it's all material. And I remember saying as we were going through this is all going to be hilarious in the book one day. And so I can't remember when, but I sat down and wrote the entire book trying to remember. Same thing I did with Never Shoot a Stampede Queen. I was just trying to remember it all. I was trying to remember all the details before I got too old and it got too fuzzy and blurry, right?
Yep.
Because this is one of the craziest things I've ever lived. I should write it all out. So I write this book and I am going to do this as fiction, right? I'm gonna do what everybody does with their first novel. Like every other first novel, yeah, sure, it's fiction. It just happens to be about somebody who lived the exact same life as you, worked at the same place, has the same number of siblings, right? Like, I mean, look at almost every acclaimed first novel. It's like that. So I'm gonna write a novel, but it's really gonna be the initiation with like a happy ending where where the show's a huge success type of thing. And what happens is Never Shoot a Stampede Queen wins the Leacock Medal for humor, becomes a BC bestseller, and suddenly I have an agent who's saying, "Do you have another comic memoir?" And I'm going, "Well, I've got this thing and it's true, but I wasn't going to say it was true." And they're going, "Well, we'd really like you to do another comic memoir." And I'm going, "I've had, you know, like, I haven't had that many funny things happen to me in my life, right? Like, that merit a book." And I said, "This was one of them." And so they read it and went, "Can you, put this out as your follow-up to Never Should a Stampede Queen?" And that's how it was released as a memoir. But I'd originally thought I'm going to do it as a YA novel. And at the time, I don't know if you remember this, but I reached out to you. I reached out to our Santar.
And it's
Uh,
okay. You can say now his name. It was
okay,
Scott McNeil
so I reached
because
out.
to Scott McNeil, and I just want to point it out because when we did the documentary, I couldn't get a hold of him, so I couldn't get him to sign a release. And because it was
Yeah,
done for Telus, I had to have anybody's names that was mentioned as their release.
gotcha.
So
Well, I
that's the only
reached out to
reason.
you. I reached out to our old and dear friend Scott
Yeah.
McNeil, and I didn't hear back from Scott saying, "Well, you didn't for your clearances." And I didn't. And when I talked to you, you said, "I don't know if I'm okay being outed as me in this book because I'm teaching in schools. I don't know if I want everybody to know this is me. So would you change my name?" So I changed your name to Randy, which was sort of a tribute to our
To
mutual
our
friend,
mutual friend Randy, who's the magician.
Randy the
Yeah.
magician.
Randy Chirac. Yeah.
And I can't remember what I changed Scott's name to, but I changed the names and I did just a little bit of tweaking so that you could lie and pretend the guy wasn't you. And you probably don't remember this, but oh, and I had a huge fight with my publishers like the week this is going to print because I had the book the book had what I thought was like one of the best things I've ever written in any of my books. I had this code at the end that said, okay, Steve went on to continue being a professional magician for his entire life. He's performing here, here, and here. Scott went on to become one of Vancouver's most successful voiceover actors and is still performing to this day. Two of the women who were in our show went on to have one in particular epic freaking careers. I don't know if they'd be okay with me naming them,
Understood.
but one of them is absolutely one of Canada's most successful writers. Um, what a, oh god, I can't remember if she was Gamatria or Titania, but we can discuss not the one that
It was
you got in trouble
Gematria.
with.
It wasn't Titania. Yeah, it's
Okay,
Titania. Yeah.
but
And that's in the book, isn't it? That is in the
yeah,
book.
I think so. Yes, it is. But Gematria went on to have a, and is still having an epically successful career.
Oh,
So what I
wonderful.
loved about that was it said we weren't delusional. We may not have known what we were doing. We may not have been able to pull it off, but all the key players actually went on to do exactly what we all thought we were capable of doing, which I thought was a wonderful,
Legacy.
wonderful ending for the book, right?
Definitely.
Like it was because it says, "Oh my God, these kids weren't crazy, right? They had a dream and they didn't pull it off, but they kept at their dreams and then they pulled it off." Like it was such a great ending.
That,
And my
question.
publisher,
Oh, sorry.
oh, so my publisher just days before it's going to press, calls me and said, "We want to cut the coda." I said, "You can't cut the coda." They said, "What if these people sue us?" I said, "Nobody's going to sue us." And I said, "We're still not even naming them." Like, no, now they're identifiable. Now they can. And I'm like,
Oh,
"Can you please tell your lawyer to chill out?" No. And so basically, I discovered this is being pulled from the book. I absolutely to this day believe in terms of those things that happen that change your life in a bad way. I absolutely believe that cutting this coda made the book less successful because it meant that the book actually had a legit happy ending. It had a legit uplifting, isn't this cool ending? And that was cut days before we went to print. And the funniest thing was days after, because you were at the book launch for this, I could share book launch photos of us for
yeah,
what you're
remember
sharing
that?
online. Days after this, I think the day after it comes out, I go on Facebook and there's this picture of all of us from the original crew, and you've drawn pictures and went, "The magician," and you've ID'd every single person in the book. I'm like, if you'd done the picture like the day before the publisher called me, I could have showed them. But yeah, so and Scott phoned up and went, "I read the book in one sitting. It was so much fun." And like I got such lovely like I got nothing but lovely response to it. But and the title,
Yeah.
I hate naming my own stuff. And the title was my friend Ian Ferguson said, "Did you ever see those ads at the back of comics?" He said, "You're a comic nerd." And he's what and it was really the idea was that that title would loan itself to a really cool cover. It was
Yeah.
kind of which again the publisher didn't get the idea of the cool cover. I guess whoever was working there had never been a comic nerd as a kid, but the title was that. And I actually got the rights back to that book because I would like to release it under a different title with the coda.
That would
And
be great.
also one other thing, I made one other rookie mistake, which is um the book opens with me walking into the Jewish Community Center and seeing you guys rehearsing. And it's a really cool opening, but then I don't go back there for quite a while. And instead, then you get to, I'm gonna do this because it sort of
Please.
hurts my heart every time I look at it because it's a really good, exciting opening. Except then for the very first line of what is currently the second chapter, which should be the opening line of the book because it's the best opening line I've ever written. Like all great adventures, this one started with someone trying to get laid. King Menelaus didn't go to Troy for the baklava. Actually, since all of us were teenagers running on high octane hormones, it started with everyone trying to get laid. That that quote has been that quote is like my most famous quote if you look online, and it's really wild. I've seen people use it. I've seen sex sites use it. I'll like be looking and it'll pop up. It's like sex workers use that as their thing.
No, that's
Yeah, I've
unreal.
seen this on Twitter, and like people like link back to me, and it is without a doubt like it's the only quote from this book that I've seen end up all over the place online. And I'm going, that's my opening. So it's like
Yeah.
I give people the book down. I'm like, can I rip out the first three pages, and can I insert these two pages at the end? Um,
And it's still available. People can get it now. Can they get it
yeah,
on
you can
Amazon
find it.
or?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon, some bookstores, but yeah, at some point I'm going to release it under a new name. I'm taking. I wanted to call it the initiation, but the initiation didn't sound funny,
No.
right? It just the initiation sounded well, sounded deadly serious, which was our intent. Um, and black metal fantasy sounded too weird. Like
Yep.
it doesn't for
Understood.
a
Yep.
funny
No.
book.
No, you're
Like
right.
I've always loved that name,
Yep.
but for a funny book, it seemed very off.
Now, have you ever
Right?
thought about turning it into a screenplay?
Oh yes, I did. I wrote the screenplay. It's
Oh,
sitting, and every once in a while, somebody goes, "We should send this to Seth Rogen," and they never do. So Seth, if you're listening to this,
oh
I
yeah.
have multiple people, multiple agents that I'll try and send that, and then they just don't get around to it
It's a
because
great
it
story,
really
Seth.
is. I mean, it really is freaking super bad, right?
Yeah.
Like it really is the same territory. I think I said this in one of the doc interviews. You know, if you've seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I was convinced Spicoli was based on you,
Yeah.
right?
I remember you saying that in the interviews. That was great. Thank you. Um, I'm curious too. Also, the big success we did have in the '80s was the performer
Oh,
showcase. Now, I know I didn't for sure think there was a chance that we were going to win. What did you feel? Did you think we had a chance of winning or even getting
no,
even?
because the reason I didn't think I thought our act was wonderful. I really did. I thought, and it's funny because you ask how I kept the theater. Part of it was that.
Oh,
Part of it was the performer showcase going, yeah, I was right. We are good.
yeah.
Yeah, I was right. We do have game. You do have game. You do know what you're doing.
We definitely we.
You know, and directing a show with you that happened at the Pacific Coliseum where every concert we'd seen as kids, the Canucks played there. Like
A
it
dream
was
come true.
unfathomable that we
Yeah.
were doing a show on that stage. But I know how competitions work, and there were like child prodigies on stage,
Yeah.
and there were people doing adorable things, and I thought we were going to lose to somebody being adorable.
Yeah.
Like I didn't think doing a really great act really well was going to be enough to win. Not like we saw the other acts, and like I believed we were the best of the acts, but knowing what I know now, I'm even more shocked
Yeah.
that we won
No.
because now knowing some of the politics behind the scenes on how awards juries work, it is even more shocking that the group of us won when we were up against child prodigies and adorable things, adorable acts and whatever. And but it was and in a lot of ways it was everything the initiation should have been.
Yeah.
It was all of the tricks and illusions you already knew how to do.
Yep.
It was all the stuff you could do brilliantly. And instead for the initiation, we're like, I don't know how we're gonna do that. Sure sounds cool. Let's
Well,
try this. And meanwhile, I keep pushing you. Can we set the audience on
uh,
fire? Can we set the audience on fire?
how can we
Right?
set that?
How can we set the audience up? I want interactive. I want the audience to feel terror. And yeah, you're looking at me like I was a madman, which I was. But I just kept thinking, I want the audience to be totally into this. And we killed somebody, the audience, every show just because it was an actor for anybody
Yes,
worrying at home.
nobody ever was killed. No
No,
animals were or humans were harmed in the making of our production,
except us,
except us,
except you
exactly.
and me.
Now, with all the hats you wear, and you do wear, like I said, you're not just a journalist and a playwright, you're
Yeah.
an actor, a singer, all those things. Which one do you feel is the most rewarding to you? Which one has been the most rewarding to you?
Oh, see,
Or
now I'm going to just confuse things, right? Because what has been shockingly rewarding is an entire accidental plot twist that my life took when I came across the story of the first orca in captivity. And you're like, so if you've been listening to this so far, you go, orca, isn't that a killer whale? Yeah, huh? Isn't that like a science thing? Uh-huh. Didn't you just say theater? Yeah, huh? So, just to seriously confuse things, I came across this story about the first ever orca held in captivity at the Vancouver Aquarium, whale named Moby Doll. Um, and I just absolutely became obsessive over the idea that the Vancouver Aquarium had harpooned an orca and displayed this orca. And this was the first whale anybody ever saw in captivity, first killer whale. And killer whale was the term back then. Nobody was saying orca, except for scientists who were saying Orcinus orca. I'm throwing that in, Steve, because seriously, somebody just paused to write a nasty comment at the bottom of YouTube saying, "Why did he say it?" Yeah. So, been doing this part for a while. So, I become obsessed with this story, and the reason I become obsessed with it is because I meet the guy who led the expedition and realize that when they caught Moby Doll, everybody was convinced that this was the most dangerous animal on the face of the earth. And almost overnight, they went, "Oh my God, this is smart. Oh my God, it doesn't want to hurt us." And like, like the number of dominoes that fell in a really short time span. When the Vancouver Aquarium captures this whale, when they capture Moby Doll, the CBC TV news reports that the Vancouver Aquarium has captured a monster. That was the word they used, a monster. By
Wow.
the time Moby dies 87 days later, Vancouver's beloved killer whale. And I'm like, that change blew my mind. And suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I've discovered a real life King Kong story. I have discovered a real life science fiction story. So I didn't become obsessed with it because it was for the nice logical reasons I'm sure most science writers would become obsessed with it. I became obsessed because I went, oh my God, I have a story about first contact with alien species. That to me was my passion point for this story. So I I did I kept trying to sell the story to anybody who would have it. I kept trying to have somebody else make it because I'm like, this isn't my skill set. This isn't my world. Nothing about this, like you've heard my career
Yeah,
up till
yeah.
this point. Nothing makes you go, oh yeah, that's the guy you want writing killer whale stories. So, and again, that was the word at the time. Uh, Nothing about my CV made you think I would be the guy for this. And I had Oscar and Emmy award-winning documentary producers who went, "This is amazing." And they couldn't get it made because in the age of Free Willy, nobody wanted to hear about an orca being harpooned.
Yeah.
Like nobody wanted to do this story. And finally, CBC Radio says, you can do a radio doc for us. It sounds kind of cool. And once CBC Radio's on side, I think it was a little after that, The Walrus, which really is Canada's top magazine, said, yeah, you can do a 5,000 word feature for us. So the 5,000 word feature gets an award for science writing somewhere. I don't know if you ever had this science teacher, but my chem teacher, Mr. I don't know, I ever knew how to pronounce his name. Uh, Joachim Jockin, I think we called him Jockin, was how he said his last name. So anyway, my Chem 11 teacher who gave me a conditional pass on the condition I never take science again, if he wasn't dead, this would have killed him, right?
Yeah.
Just so he could roll over in his grave because I suddenly was recognized as a science writer.
Wow.
So the CBC thing won an award for best documentary, won a Webster Award. And at the Websters, a publisher comes up to me and says, I would like you to do a book of this. I tried to sell that book for like 15 years. Nobody wanted that book. So I didn't even believe him when he told me. And I said, thank you. That's very nice of you. And like he calls me like 3 days later, why haven't you phoned me? I thought you were just being nice because I wanted an award. He went, I'm not that nice. You know? And suddenly I had this book. And while I'm doing the book, I'm meeting every scientist and every orca expert out there to write the book. And while I'm writing the book, they went, did you hear about this 100-year-old orca? Granny? Did you hear this story? Did you hear this story? Did you hear this story? And my wife, my now wife, then partner Rain, said, you need to tell their stories. No, nobody's going to hire me to tell their stories. And so she said, okay, how's about you do a podcast and I'll produce it? So Rain, I'm like, okay, if you'll do all the tech and I don't have to do anything but talk and interview people, sure. And suddenly I went from being the person who write comedy and plays and journalism to the whale guy.
Yeah.
And the most amazing thing that came out of that, I mean, so many amazing things came out of that, but probably if I had to go the single most amazing gig I've ever done, because I wrote that book, I was invited to write a bunch of kids' books.
Yeah.
So I've now written 3 kids' books about orcas, 2 kids' books, nonfiction about sharks. I just finished one about octopus, which hits the stores as it's coming out. Doing another one on saving the oceans, all for a wonderful place called Orca Book Publishing. And because because I'm now the orca guy, when the Vancouver, when the Royal British Columbia Museum decides they're going to do an exhibit about orcas, the most expensive exhibit in the history of the museum, $1 million exhibit, I get pitched to write the exhibit. So to me, the coolest thing I've ever done was I got to write, when you walk into a museum and there's
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
words on the walls, I got to write the words on the walls.
Wow.
And and the coolest thing about that was I'd become more and more obsessed with words matter in saving this endangered population here, the southern resident orcas. And so I said, can we please not refer to them by their scientific numbers? Can we please refer to them by the names that are given to them? And the standard way of referring to orcas, really in most media or wherever, was the poor orca is carrying her dead daughter again, second time Tahlequah. Most media will refer to her as J35 because that's the number they found her in JPod when they started counting. I don't use J35. I use Tahlequah. And I managed to convince the Vancouver Aquarium. I mean, they were mocking me because every meeting I would say, that is not J2. That's Ruffles. That is not J35. That is Tahlequah. And I was like, the names matter because when
Yeah.
you want to devalue somebody, you take their name away. That's why we give prisoners numbers. And I became absolutely evangelical on this point. So
Wow.
if you ask me about artistic work, I go to a different place. But you ask me what I'm proudest of, it was getting to that exhibit and getting to convince them to use the names, not the numbers, and getting the museum to share the story of Scarlett or J50, who was this wonderful baby orca who died at a very young age, but who the best photo ever taken of an orca is taken of this orca was taken by my friend Clint Rivers. And being able to share that so that this exhibit is now at the start of a world tour, right? It was at the Royal BC Museum for 2 years. And now it's going around the world to museums around the world. And people around the world are meeting these whales and they're meeting them with names, right? So yeah, that's my thing. If
That
you
is
go, what's
that
your thing? That's my thing.
that is a wonderful thing. And I'll put up the pictures of the books, and the books are again also available on Amazon. And there's a
Oh
new
yeah,
exhibit.
everywhere all bookstores,
Oh,
the kids' books and Magic Secrets is a bit tougher to find that, but everywhere else, go support your local bookstore.
that was definitely an incredible story. But there's one I really want to talk about now. There's you and I have a lifetime of stories that we could share with each other, and this podcast could last 20 hours with all the stuff that we would definitely share. But I want to get to now because I'm definitely going to have you as a guest again if you'd like to come back again in the future. To
Anytime.
that would be fantastic. But what I am so excited for you about is your most recent huge success with a play, and you wrote this a number of years ago, if I'm not mistaken, called Shylock, based on the character of Shylock from The Merchant of Venice. Is that correct? That's the right one?
Yes, and sort of.
Okay, please tell us about this, and then tell us what has just happened with it.
Okay,
So exciting! Congratulations in
so
advance. Go on.
thank you. So I wrote a play called Shylock in the 1990s about Shylock from Merchant of Venice, and it's about a Jewish actor who gets in trouble for the Jewish community from the Jewish community for playing Shylock in Merchant of Venice. That play debuted at Bard and the Beach in Vancouver. I became the first playwright not named William Shakespeare ever produced by Bard and the Beach, and that play has had a tremendous life, where it has been translated into several languages. It's played various places around the world. Uh, the most amazing production to me was it had a 3-year run in Prague, at
Right.
and I got to go there, and it was filmed for television there. And so this illustrates this incredible life. And during the pandemic, the actor Saul Rubinek, and if his name isn't familiar, trust me, you look at his face and you go, oh my God, he's.
Yep.
And if you've got 5 people in the room, 5 of you will have a different answer for who he is.
Exactly.
Right? So if there's
Exactly.
5 people, it depends on how old you are. It depends on what you watch. If you are me and Steve, you're going to go, oh my God, he's the collector who got data.
Yes,
Right?
that's
And,
exactly it. That's
right?
exactly it. On Star Trek: The
So
Next Generation. I love
yeah,
that episode.
so if you're a nerd like me and Steve, it's like he is the collector, man. If you are almost anybody else, it's like, oh, he's the guy from True Romance, or oh my God, he's the guy from Warehouse 13, or oh my God, he's reporter Unforgiven, uh,
He was in The
or for
Hunters. Did you see The Hunters?
in Hunters, in
Oh,
Mrs. Maisel, and
yeah.
the one that so many people know him from, he is the guy who Daphne almost married in Frasier. So
Right.
for
Yes.
most people, he's Donnie from Frasier. For
Yeah.
me, really, it's two things that I nerded out over. Um, because yeah, I'm a huge Next Gen fan, but I also think Unforgiven is one of the best movies ever made,
Yes.
and his part is freaking brilliant. Not just
Yes.
one of the best westerns, one of the best movies. And I knew so many people in that cast because they cast a whole bunch of BC actors because it was shot in Alberta. So I had a bunch of friends in that movie, uh, in like smaller parts. I'm not like wish I was not friends with Clint. Didn't know Saul, but I knew a lot of the people who sort of like died early deaths in that movie and stuff like that. It was cool. Uh, but so during the pandemic, I get this Facebook message out of the blue from a playwright friend in Toronto who said, the actor Saul Rubinek is really into Merchant of Venice. Do you mind if I send him your play, Shylock? I'm like, oh, you mean the play that I pitched him for so many times? Whenever anybody said, thinking maybe we should do Shylock and Toronto, it. Saul Rubinek, check out Saul. Like, he was always, when they're like, give me a wish list of 5 actors, he was always on that wish list when people were looking for bigger productions. People were going, maybe we should do a movie about this. I'm like, have you thought of Saul Rubinek? Like, so he was always in my head for this part. And Saul reads the play and he said, I don't know if I agree with you about, this and this and that and Merchant of Venice. I'm like, well, really, man, the play to me wasn't about Merchant of Venice. It was about other things. I wanted to explore issues around censorship.
Mhm.
And I'd never seen Merchant of Venice when I wrote it. I said, now I've met some of the great Shylocks of the modern age. I hung out with Patrick Stewart, who became
Yeah.
famous as Shylock before he was famous as Jean-Luc Picard. That was his fame breakout role, as I understand it, at the
Wow.
Royal Shakespeare was playing Shylock. So he showed up in the original run of Shylock at Merchant and invited me for drinks, where I tried desperately to avoid mentioning my passionate love for Next Gen. And all I could think of was, oh, please say make it so, please say. And he's looking at me, and as far as he's concerned, I am the Shakespeare expert. And he is talking to me about Shakespeare at a really high level, and I'm going, I don't know who that character's playing. Yeah, okay, sure. And I'm just smiling and nodding away, going, "Oh my God, it's Patrick Stewart." But so, but like I've actually become something of an expert on Merchant of Venice because everybody assumed I was an expert on Merchant of Venice. So I just kept learning more, and the play kept being done at Shakespeare festivals and. So then Saul says, if I ever did this, because the whole play is meant to blur the line between fact and fiction, he said, if I ever did this, you know, I'd want the character to just be named Saul Rubinek. I wouldn't want to play a character named John Davis. And my eyes light up like somebody's just dropped the best Hanukkah present of all time on my lap. And I'm going, you would really do that. And we have different versions of this story, but my version is straight up. I heard this and my eyes lit up because I
Wow.
went, oh my God, my happiest place working in theater and in film and in radio drama has been taking the journalist in me and blurring that line between fact and fiction. And there were a lot of people who went to see Shylock when it was at Shakespeare festivals who thought that Merchant of Venice had really been canceled because the whole premise is the actor is talking to the audience after a talkback session after the play has been canceled. And I thought, well, in 2024 or in 2022, when we were having the conversation during the pandemic, a play would get canceled much faster. A play would get canceled at the speed of a tweet. And I thought that would be so much more interesting. And at some point during the conversation, Saul, as we're talking about this, he said, "Well, couldn't they find it was canceled at intermission?" I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so cool! It's so cool, so cool." So I said that's an amazing idea, but you know what? I've got my own stuff to write. I can't afford to write this on spec. So if we can ever find anybody doing theater ever again, and you can get me a commission, we can find a commission for it. I'd love to write it. But I said, I just, I've got to pay the bills in the middle of a
Yeah.
pandemic. I've got other writing I've promised myself I was going to do while the world shut down. And a few weeks later, he calls and says, "Yeah, I got somebody who's going to pay you to write this play." And I went, "Seriously?" And because it would have to be a new play. I said, it would have to be set in the world we're in now,
Yeah.
and it would have to be about you. And my stipulation was we couldn't have the same name because it was not going to be the same play.
Yeah.
And the only lines that are the same. The actor who played Shylock, an actor named John Huston, who played Shylock almost 100 times across Canada, came to see it. And he's like, there isn't a single line the same except for the lines from Shakespeare. I went, nope. He said some of the beats, I recognize some of the moves, but he said he doesn't go where I went. I went, nope, different play, different
Wow.
experience. And so it was in. So as soon as Saul gets me the commission, I basically decide it's got to sound exactly like him and it's got to be so dear to his heart. So I go and I listen to it. I watch every single interview with him online, every YouTube, everything on YouTube, every podcast, every, because it was his voice I wanted more than his life story. I wanted his voice. I wanted to
Yeah.
hear his verbal tics. I wanted to hear what's his go-to story when he's asked about this. I wanted to find out what he was comfortable talking about his family, because most of his family did not survive the Holocaust. He was born in a displaced persons camp, right? He's had a hell of a life. And when I found out that he spoke fluent Yiddish, I'm like, oh, you're so speaking Yiddish on stage. I'm so putting this, but I'm like, I needed to learn everything about him. And I became basically, I spent a good part of the pandemic majoring in Saul Rubinek studies.
Wow.
And then I put together a draft, and the whole goal of the draft was it has to sound exactly like him. It
Yeah.
has to sound like I didn't write a word of it.
Yeah.
But he is coming out on stage on fire because he's just found out at intermission that his play is supposed to be canceled. His production, Merchant of Venice, is being canceled that night, and they're not supposed to find out till after the show. But word is leaked out, and he has told the cast, "I'm not going on. You guys go away, and I'm going to tell the audience how I feel about this." And he is, before the play opened, like about a few months before the play opened, Globe and Mail does a story about the 25 greatest Canadian actors of all time. And Saul comes in at number 25. I guarantee you, if they'd seen this performance, he cracks the top 10.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
because he is astonishing in this. So it opens at Canadian Stage, which is one of the biggest theaters in the country, one of the most prestigious theaters in the country, which all started with our director, Martin Kinch. So Martin and Saul started working together. Basically, Steve, it's as if you and I went back 50 years later and did the initiation,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Because Saul and Martin started their careers together as kids. They opened this theater together. As Saul says in the play, we cleaned the pigeon shit off the walls of this barn because and convinced people it was a theater, right?
Yep.
So I wrote all of that in. I wrote in their personal history. I wrote in the rapport between Saul and Martin. So when he talks about the director, he's talking about his real director and his real friend of 50 years.
Wow.
So who is one of the best dramaturges in Canada, one of the most amazing directors. So it has been a long time since I've been the baby on a project, but Saul's mid 70s. He's 76 now, 76 when it opened. Mark, I think, is 81. I was very much the baby of this project, learning from two freaking masters as I went. And the play opened to an amazing response. Like watching the audience in the show is magical. I'm watching them be completely captivated by Saul on stage as he comes out basically on fire because somebody's just canceled his baby. And so much of what he says on stage is his truth, his biography. The only thing that I was like, yeah, I know it's not true, but for the purposes of this play, Shylock in Merchant has to be your dream role, and it has to have been your father's dream role because his father was an actor in the Yiddish theater. And I
Oh.
said, that gets me the power and the momentum
Yeah.
to set the stakes as high as I need them. That this isn't an ordinary gig, but also because he's 76, because this might be his last ever show. Like there's no way to there's no way to be dealing with that. And the play not also be about mortality. And the play also be about what an actor can do now. There's so, you know, and yeah, I can't stress enough how amazing he is on stage. There was a moment in rehearsal when he was doing the Have Not a Jew Eyes speech when I realized that I was witnessing the best performance of Shakespeare I'd ever seen in my life, of any Shakespeare that I'd ever seen in my life. And it's just some amazing actors. And then there was a moment in one of the previews where it hit me. It is very weird to say this. I want to be really careful to get across. I'm taking my words out of the equation when I say this. I'm not talking about my script. I am saying his performance, I realized, was the single best solo performance I had seen in my life outside of maybe Lily Tomlin in Search for Signs of Intelligent Life, which was a play that changed my life completely.
Oh.
And I went, oh my God, I'm witnessing something just magical. And I'm very reluctant to tell people about myself. And even when I was plugging this, I didn't say, go see this because it's the coolest thing I've ever written. I tried to leave the me out of the equation because you may or may not like what I've written, but there's no way to not be fascinated by what he's doing on stage.
What he
It,
does. Yeah.
it's just an electric performance on stage, and it was held over 3 times. The reviews were ridiculous. People referred to it as like it made year end best of the year list for Toronto, and as of you probably do not know this because it just happened days ago. It is being brought back to Toronto, where it is being performed at one of the Mirvish theaters, which is one of the bigger, more prestigious houses in Toronto. April 1st to 7th, it's coming back for a special 1 week run.
And that Saul with Saul?
So, oh, of course, it's all.
Wow.
It's his play, man.
That is
And
awesome. That is
so it is. So April 1st to 7th, it is back in Toronto. There are other possibilities I cannot talk about,
yep.
especially publicly.
Understood.
And
100%
also,
understood. Yes.
one thing I did take away from the initiation and all our close calls, I don't talk about stuff till it's announced.
Yes.
If there's anything that of the many messages I took away from our wild ride together, one of them was until the tickets are on sale, it ain't real.
It
And
yes.
so I can tell you the tickets went on
Yeah.
sale 3 days ago. for
Muzzle tough.
the for the rematch.
That is that is
Uh,
that is fantastic. Seriously, congratulations. I will have shared some
Thank you.
pictures. You've probably all seen them now that I've shared, and we'll have more information. Even include, I'll put the name of the theater it's going to be playing at. So anybody in
Yeah,
Toronto who sees this, definitely check this out. You guys see, I mean, just for the sake it's Saul, but I mean, I'm so proud of you,
yeah.
Mark, for
Thank
creating
you.
such a thing and to being able to work with him. You have been able to interview dozens of celebrities, and I'm going to talk about that more next time we in our next interview. But there is one celebrity that, thanks to you, you got me to meet. It was one of the greatest moments of
Oh
my
my
life.
God.
Because of you, I got to meet Doug Henning. And for those of you who remember the Magic World, Doug Henning was
Oh,
my idol. He was like he
mine
was,
too.
and the fact that because you had interviewed him or got to interview him, I believe was what happened. You
Yeah,
got us
interviewed him
to
for the Georgia Straight.
Right. And so you got us backstage, and I got to stand and meet Doug Henning, and it was such a moment in my life that I will never forget, and cannot be grateful enough to you for making that happen for me. That was wonderful. So I just now want to make sure I get that out there because it was a life-changing moment for me. There was the way
Yeah,
his eyes were so penetrating. Like when he looked at you, he looked at you. And that it was just he was just an amazing man. I'm sorry we lost him at such a young age, but yeah, Doug Henning, look him up if you don't know who he is. Look him up. You'll be blown
please.
away. And on that note, something new that I'm going to be adding to these Believe Magic podcasts. I'm going to be doing magic with each of my guests, and I have a special magic trick I'm going to do.
Awesome.
I'm going to do it. Yes, I'm excited to do this with you, Mark. And just to confirm to everybody out there, Mark is not in on this. He has no idea what's about to
Yeah.
happen. It's just a simple little card trick, but I'm going to test Mark's intuition with this card trick. I'll do the trick with you, then I'm going to come back and we'll close off. Okay, does that sound good?
Awesome. I'm
Just
in.
going to change the camera and head over to this trick. All right.
Ooh.
So you see, I have some cards here, 6 cards. Let's assume that these 4 cards that are face down are the 4 queens. Okay? And from your point of view, this will be number 1, this will be number 2, this will be number 3, and this will be number 4. Now I'm going to have you choose a queen in a second. You can say whichever queen you want. But just for purposes for our audience, Queen of Hearts is the most commonly chosen one. You can choose it if you want to. Coming in a close second is Queen of Spades, then Queen of Diamonds, then Queen of Clubs. Now, I don't want to influence you on any of your choices, but one of these queens is real, the other 3 are imposters. Which of those 4 queens do you think is the real queen?
Queen of clubs.
You're going to say it's the Queen of Clubs. That's
Yeah.
your choice. All right. Now, I want you to tell me which ones, one at a time, are not the Queen of Clubs. Is it number 1, 2, 3, or 4 that is not the Queen of Clubs?
4.
So you're saying this one is not the Queen of Clubs?
Yep.
Okay. I will take that one out and place it there. Okay. Which next one, 1, 2, or 3, is not the Queen of Clubs?
2.
Number 2, this one here in the middle.
Yeah.
I will take that one out. Now, finally, between these two, this one or 2, which is not the Queen of Clubs?
1.
Number 1, this one is not the Queen of Clubs.
Yep.
You had these were all your own free choices. You were not in on this. You left me with one card. Could this be the one card left over? Turn it over, and sure enough, the last card is the Queen of Clubs. Which is kind of
Ooh.
what's fascinating about this that you did that. That's not too bad, not too hard to do. But maybe you might think these are all Queen of Clubs. Well, like I said, this is the real one. These 3 are the imposters. The only card we had was the Queen of Clubs, and you found it.
Very cool.
That was your intuition, my friend. That was definitely your intuition. You are the magic one. Mark, this has been an exciting. I love this. The bottom line, though, the bottom line of all this is that life is going to throw hurdles at us. Life
Oh
is going
yeah.
to try over and over to knock us down. Life is going to give us the biggest promises and the biggest offers in the world and then snatch them away. And we need to, as you have done, as you have proven, especially after what happened with the initiation, that of course you can learn all about if you read the Free Magic Secrets Revealed, that you get back up and you just keep going. You have the positive mental attitude and you can make things happen. And look, with my friend Mark here, what he has made happen in his career over and over and over again because he didn't give up. Correct?
I'll go with that. Absolutely.
Well, it's totally true. I mean, look at the smile on his face. It is just like the most beaming. Because it is going to happen to us. We're going to get knocked down, but we got to get back up. And everybody knows that. You only fail if you refuse to get back up. And I'll tell you right now, my friend Mark has never refused to get back up. Thank you so much for giving me all this time, sharing these wonderful stories. What's next? You've got Shylock happening again. Is there another project you're working on? Anything you want to leave us with that you're beside Shylock? What the next thing you're going
So
to be doing?
playing Shylock. Not
Play.
not Shylock, playing Shylock is the name of this play, the one with Saul.
Oh, it's called Playing
Uh,
Shylock. Oh, thank you.
playing
Thank you for the
Shylock,
correction. Playing Shylock. Okay, yeah.
playing Shylock. And next up is, oh, hang on. Once, well, you'll be able to find the cover. Octopus Ocean Geniuses of the Deep, being released February 11th. So my
Okay.
new book just coming out now, hitting stores now, on sale now. Middle school book about octopuses because octopuses are freaking awesome.
Oh, they are totally. And so you'll have a picture I can share with this as well.
Yep,
So I'll get that up there as well. That book will be out again. When? What was the date it's released?
it's probably out now.
It's
By the
probably out
time
now.
you get this up, you should be able to find it in bookstores.
Well, fantastic. Anybody who's watching this, please subscribe to the channel. Leave us any comments, any
Oh,
notes. If
Stan a podcast. Check out my podcast where I talk
oh
about whales and ocean life.
I'll put
I
a
always, of all the things I should be forgetting to talk about, it's the podcast where I'm talking about, my next one up. I'm interviewing Paul Watson, who just got out of jail in Greenland, and we just had a great talk last night.
I will put a link up for that as well as a way to connect to Mark. If you want to connect to him, if you want to learn about what he's doing, if you want to have him write something for you, he can do a lot of things. I way too much to explain now, but yeah, reach out to Mark. He is a wonderfully approachable person and is just a delight to spend time with, and especially to work with. Especially to work with. Mark, brother, I love you. I appreciate your time. Please give my love to your beautiful wife, and I look forward to sharing some of the feedback we get from our viewers. So thank you for
Awesome.
being part of the very first ever Believe Magic podcast. Thank
Thank
you, my
you
friend.
so much for doing this, Maestro.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure indeed. Thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a great night, and we will see you on the next one.